that you would like to gain out of this workshop, feel free to pop up and say what kinds of things you want to get. So this workshop is everything from you, the company, getting registered and certified and going through the process, what we call the pre-award process. That's all the steps leading up to award of a contract. And in my workshop, I include a couple things after that also. What kinds of things specifically are you interested in? And I'll see if I can address those today.
Kiana, I see that you were trying to talk, but I'm not hearing anything. Can you put your question in chat? So Terry, one of the questions is how best to contact and engage with contracting officers.
Okay. Small business liaison officers for the agency. Okay.
Well, he didn't say SBLOs. He just said contracting officers, which I think is sometimes a common misconception, right?
You're right. Yeah, it's hard to go directly to a contracting officer. It's best to go through the agency small business liaison officer, who then communicates with the contracting officer. And we have a lot of contacts for those agency small business specialists that we can provide to the companies so they can start communicating with them and providing their capability statement. All right, so let's go on from there. I'm interested to find out if any of the attendees have had in the past or currently have any federal contracts with any agencies, whether it's Department of Defense or any of the civilian agencies, whether it's services, construction, architect engineering, IT, ship repair, supply, whatever. Does anybody have any experience, past or present, with federal contracts?
We submitted one and it's still under consideration.
You've submitted a proposal.
Yep.
And what type of a contract? Construction, services, supplies?
Computer and software solutions.
Okay, so IT, and that's from David, okay?
Yeah.
Anybody else have federal contract experience? Okay. So the flow of information in this presentation is chronological. We start with prior to the solicitation, and we go through the solicitation process and a couple steps beyond the actual award of a contract. So some of those steps would be you registering, receiving a request for a proposal. You're going to review the proposal, prepare, and if you decide to compete, then you're going to prepare a proposal. It will get evaluated and awarded, and then you would typically ask for a debrief, depending on the dollar value of the procurement, and perform satisfactorily and get a performance evaluation if it meets the dollar threshold. And we'll talk about all these things. In my 29 years of experience, there's at least 2 points of failure in all of those steps. And the first one would be reviewing the solicitation and not reading it in its entirety, because there's information in various places throughout a solicitation that you need to know, comprehend, in deciding whether to compete, and also important for pricing. And then after award is customer satisfaction, making sure you're doing a great, stellar job for the agency that you got the contract from, because ultimately you'll get a performance evaluation. And that goes up in the sky for all federal agencies to see how well or how poorly you did on this contract that you just finished. And if you got less than a satisfactory, chances of you getting another contract in 5 years is slim. So that will live with you for a number of years. So I would ask that you jot down your questions on your paper, save them to the end. We'll get through the presentation, and then we can go back to any of the slides or topics that you want to talk about. I think this works out best because a lot of your questions may be answered on upcoming slides. So we'll go through the slides and then we'll go back to doing questions. Okay, before we go to the next slide, are there any questions at this time?
Not seeing any.
Okay. So, are you ready for a government contract? And you'll see that I have underlined the letter G in government. I learned early on in my contracting career that government is spelled two ways, one with a capital G and one with a little g. Capital G government means federal. That's all federal agencies. Lowercase g, is all other governments, such as state, county, city, municipalities, so on and so forth. So to get ready for a government contract, you have to be registered in SAM and know what your certifications are that can help you win the award of a contract. So, are you registered? I'll make the assumption that all the participants of this workshop are already in business, maybe just starting up, but most of you probably have been in business for a number of years. So if that's the case, you have a DUNS number already. You need a DUNS number in order to register in SAM, which is number 2 there, SAM registration. So under number 1, DUNS stands for Data Universal Numbering System. And Dun & Bradstreet just lost that contract, which they've had since 1998. And they lost out to Ernst & Young. And Ernst & Young will be providing a code called Unique Entity ID later this year. And below that, you'll see the website for you to get a DUNS number if you don't already have one. With that DUNS number, then you can go into and register in SAM. SAM stands for the System for Award Management. The DUNS number is 9 characters, and the Unique Entity ID number that Ernst & Young will be providing later this year, starting later this year and into the future, is a 12-character number. So when you register in SAM, there will be a field in there where you have to put your DUNS number in, and SAM will automatically give you a cage code number. Your registration is good for 12 months, and before that expires, you need to go in every 11 to 12 months and update your registration in SAM. Otherwise, it will expire, and the federal agencies will not be able to see you because you'll be non-existent. So in SAM, there is a section in there for representations and certifications. You need to make sure that you complete each and every one of those. Read them, understand them, look them up into the federal acquisition regulation if need be. And the thing to do with reps and certs is every time you submit a proposal, you need to make sure that your representations and certifications are current, complete, and applicable to the solicitation proposal that you are submitting. And each year when you go in to recertify, check your reps and certs to make sure that they're still current, because things can change throughout the year. I provided the website to go get to SAM and for you to register. So next is certifications. The next 2 slides identify different socioeconomic certifications that you want to be aware of. The more of these certifications that you qualify for, the more opportunities there are for you to compete and win awards. So the very first basic one is small business. You determine if you're a small business by looking up your NAICS code. NAICS is N-A-I-C-S, which stands for North American Industrial Classification System. So the federal government has identified all the different types of services and supplies, and they've assigned a code to them. So you can have more than one code. You probably will have a primary or two primaries, and you may have some secondary NAICS codes. Once you identify those NAICS codes, and I've provided the website there, www.naics.com. You can scroll through there, identify your NAICS codes. Then each NAICS code can have a different size standard, which determines whether you're a small business or a large business. I've provided the website for you to go to. It's sba.gov, and it's a table size standards. And you'll put in your NAICS code, and it will tell you so many millions of dollars for that NAICS code or so many employees. And if you have less than that, then you are a small business. And if you have more than that, then you are a large business. And to make that determination for if it's a NAICS code with a dollar threshold, it is an average of your income over 5 years. So say NAICS codes are 6 digits. You have a 6-digit code. You put it into the SBA website for size standards, and it says $15 million. That $15 million is an average over 5 years. And if your company makes less than $15 million per year in that NAICS code, then you are a small business. And as I have on the screen here, that is self-certifying. The only time that will be challenged is when you compete, submit a proposal, and an award is made to you, and one of the other competitors says, wait a minute, they're not a small business. They're a large business. So they can submit a protest. And so that's the only time that it will be challenged, because this is a self-certifying certification. The next two are veteran-owned. The first one, veteran-owned small business, and the second one is service-disabled veteran-owned small business. So the first one, VOSB, is self-certifying. Once again, you're just identifying that your company is a veteran-owned small business. The second one is service-disabled veteran-owned small business, and that is a certification process that you have to go through the Small Business Administration. And the Veterans Administration calls it CVE for a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. I've also provided the website there for you to go into the Small Business Administration website and submit your qualifications to be registered or certified as a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. Let's go on to the next screen and we'll see some more certifications. So the next category is woman-owned. Woman-owned small business, and there's also an economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business. Currently, it's self-certifications. You self-certify through, that is good through October of this year. The Small Business Administration will have a process starting July of this year where the Small Business Administration will be certifying women-owned small businesses. And the process now, or even in the future with the SBA, that certification will still utilize third-party certifiers. So in order to get certified as a woman-owned small business, you'll have to, in most cases, contact a third-party certifier that will review your application. Most times they will ask many in-depth questions just to make sure that you are a qualified woman-owned small business. And when you pass all those hurdles, then you'll have a certification for being a woman-owned small business. There's the website underneath there for the new process with the SBA. It's called certified.sba.gov. If you're a woman-owned small business, you'll want to go there and submit your information and see if you can get certified as a woman-owned small business. The next one is Hubzone. That stands for Historically Underutilized Business Zone. There are a number of them throughout the country. All Indian reservations are automatically hub zones, so that won't change. The hub zones change every 10 years as a result of the census, and we are going through a census right now in 2020. So I suspect when the results come out next year that current hub zones may disappear and new hub zones may appear. The advantage of getting certified in a hub zone is there are very few companies that you'll be competing with, and prime contractors and federal agencies have a hard time meeting their socioeconomic goals for hub zones. So if you can get certified as your company being headquartered in a hub zone, and I think it's 35% of your employees live in a hub zone somewhere in the country, then you get certified as a hub zone company. And that is an advantage for getting contracts or being a subcontractor to a prime contractor, because the prime contractor is a company that receives the award, so they're considered the prime contractor, and every contractor that they hire to fulfill some part of the requirement is a subcontractor. So the prime contractors have socioeconomic goals, typically the same socioeconomic goals as the federal agency. So for example, federal agency might have a goal for a fiscal year of, say, 3% of the awards need to be to hub zone. So when they award that contract to the large business or to the business as the prime contractor, in that contract, the prime contractor also has that goal that when they subcontract out, they have a goal of 3% also to hub zone companies. To become certified as a hub zone company, you go through the SBA. The Small Business Administration does that certification process. And I provided the website for you to go to and submit your request for certification as a hub zone company. So the last category is the Small Business Administration 8A program. That is for socially and economically disadvantaged individuals or entities. Another word for companies. That process is a Small Business Administration certification process. I provided the website there. The program is a 9-year program. The intent of it is to help socially and economically disadvantaged individuals or companies to learn the process of federal contracting. The 8A program is structured that at the beginning of the 9 years, I think it's like the first 4 years, your predominance of your contracts will be from federal agencies. And as you go through the 9-year program, you get the last 5 years, you're weaning off of government contracts, and you are successfully competing and getting contracts in private industry. So at the end of 9 years, and you graduate from the program, you should be very competitive in private industry with your competitors for getting contracts. So in the 9-year program, there are lots of classes for you to learn about business and competing and putting proposals together and negotiating. It's a great program. So if you're socially and economically disadvantaged, you may want to consider going to that website and applying to become an SBA 8A contractor. One of the advantages of being an 8A contractor is the federal agencies, when they do their market research, one of one of the steps that they do is they check with the SBA to see if there are any 8A companies that can fulfill the agency's requirement. And if so, then the agency can submit to the Small Business Administration a request for this particular company, for example, your company that is in the 8A program, and they will send a solicitation directly to you and to nobody else. There is no competition. So that's the big advantage for the SBA 8A program for that 9-year period that you're in the program. All right, so that's the different socioeconomic certifications, 2 pages worth there. The 8A program, the Hubzone, the women-owned, the veteran-owned, and just being a small business. All right, moving on. Fedbizopps, also known as FBO, stands for Federal Business Opportunities. It's located in the website there, beta.sam.gov. This is where you can find the opportunities to compete for award of any federal agency's requirements. Department of Defense, EPA, Department of Energy, FEMA, Department of Commerce, all of them. They post their opportunities in Fedbizopps. So you want to be very familiar with this website, beta.sam.gov. This website just was created in the past year. And so what the federal government is doing is taking websites, various websites, and putting them all under beta.sam.gov. Once that process is completed, then it will, beta.sam will go away and just become sam.gov, because there was a sam.gov, and we'll talk about that in an upcoming slide. So in Fedbizopps, you will see at the most three different times a federal agency will be inquiring about a requirement that they have. The first one is sources sought. So the federal agency is doing their market research, and they are looking for companies that can fulfill the requirement. They will put a synopsis of the requirement in Fedbizopps, and it'll be posted for a week or 2 weeks, maybe 30 days, looking for companies that are interested in, that can fulfill this particular requirement. It is very important for you, if you are certified in any of those socioeconomic programs, whether you're a veteran-owned, a Hubzone, an 8A company, to respond to the sources sought. The reason for that is if they can get 2 or 3 or more companies in a particular socioeconomic program, say service disabled veteran-owned companies, 2 or 3 or more companies respond to the sources sought and say, we're interested and we are service disabled veteran-owned, the contracting officer for that agency can set aside that procurement for only service disabled veteran-owned small businesses, and those will be the only companies that can compete for it. So for example, the solicitation goes out on Fedbizopps, and it says it's set aside to service disabled veteran-owned small businesses only. And a small business and a large business also put in, they spend the resources to put a proposal together, and they submit it along with a number of SDVOSB companies. Well, the small business doesn't qualify because they're not service disabled veteran-owned, and the large business is not service disabled veteran-owned. Their proposals are thrown out because they're non-responsive. And only those that are service disabled veteran-owned that submit proposals will be evaluated and considered for award of the contract. So that's why it's very important to respond to sources sought. You should know who your competition is, And if there are other companies that you know that are in the same socioeconomic program as you, it would be in your best interest to contact them and tell them about this sources sought notice that just came out in the Fedbizopps. And if they're interested, to also respond. And the reason for doing that is if you and one or two other companies respond to this, then there's a greater chance that the contracting officer will set it aside just for your socioeconomic certification. So that's real important to respond to sources sought. Always be on the lookout for those. The second time that a notice will come out in Fedbizopps is the pre-solicitation notice. And what the agency is telling you is that we're about to issue a solicitation. And in there, they'll typically say on or about a certain date. And they typically do that for about 45 days prior to issuing the solicitation. So that's another thing that you want to look for also is pre-solicitation notices. The last notice that you'll see in Fedbizopps is the actual solicitation. There are different names for them. Here are a few of them. Request for proposal. That's typically a solicitation that has a value greater than the simplified acquisition threshold, which currently is $250,000 for the federal government. At the end there, you'll see request for quote. That is for solicitations with an estimated value of less than the simplified acquisition threshold, $250,000. And in the middle there is invitation for bid, an IFB. That's for sealed bid procedures. That is Federal Acquisition Regulation Part 14, which is for sealed bids. And Part 15 is for negotiated procurements, which a request for proposal is issued. So RFPs are negotiated procurements under FAR Part 15, and invitations for bid are sealed bidding procurements under FAR Part 14. Moving on. Solicitation review. So solicitation just came out in Fedbizopps. You are now going to read it cover to cover, and you're going to decide whether you have the capacity and capability, interest, money to expend resources to put a proposal together and compete for it and go for the award. So these are a number of things to consider when you get a solicitation, when you do the review. So you'll see halfway down there, I've already mentioned capacity and capability. One of the first things on top of the list there is set aside. We talked about this on previous screens. You want to look at the solicitation and see if it has been set aside for any socioeconomic certification group of contractors, like small business, women-owned, Hubzone, Small Business Administration 8A. Because if it is set aside and you're not one of them, pass it up. Don't waste your time putting a proposal together, because it will not be considered. So scanning down through here, there are different types of contracts. There's firm fixed price versus cost type. There's different evaluation methods. There's price only. LPTA is low price technically acceptable. BVTO is best value trade-off. And sealed bid, we talked about it before. It's just putting in your bid. It's just a price. And there's a public bid opening. They read all the prices that they received in the offers, and then they identify and declare an apparent winner. Then the proposals are then evaluated further after the public opening. Labor acts. You got to read the solicitation to see if any labor acts apply. So there is identified the new abbreviations for what we used to have heard for decades. For example, Davis-Bacon Act, Service Contract Act, the Walsh-Healy Public Contracts Act. So Congress, about 2.5 years ago, changed the names of these acts. So the SCLSS is now the Service Contract Labor Standards Statute. They made it longer, more difficult. And the next one, CWRRS, used to be the Davis-Bacon Act. It is now called Construction Wage Rate Requirements Statute. Longer name. So you may, most contracting officers and agencies are still calling them the Service Contract Act and the Davis-Bacon Act, but the ones that are current in their vocabulary will be using these abbreviations for the new name for those acts. Solicitations may require that you have on your staff key personnel, such as a project manager, a superintendent, a quality control specialist, quality control manager, a safety officer, and whatnot. Those drive your price. You want to make sure that if the agency is requiring you to have any of these key personnel, which are overhead expenses, that you identify those and make sure that you either have them on your staff or you can hire them and put it in as part of your proposal. Because if you don't have them and you get awarded the contract and you don't have that person, and that delays performance, and you end up being late on the contract because now you had to go out and hire this, say, quality control manager that you weren't aware of when you evaluated the proposal, and you didn't put it in the price of your proposal. They're not going to compensate you after award. And if you're late, you're going to get a poor performance evaluation, or you could even be terminated. A certificate of cost and pricing data, that's for procurements that are greater than $2 million. If your proposal and award of the contract is greater than $2 million, you will have to submit a certificate of cost and pricing data. Also in the solicitation, be aware of the cutoff dates for when you can ask questions. Always review the solicitation, say the first few days to a week that it comes out, and go through and do the review of the solicitation, do your assessment, note the dates. When was it issued? When is the proposal due? What is the pre-proposal inquiry cutoff date? Always check for amendments. Just because you got the solicitation in Federal Business Opportunities, Fedbizopps, or FBO, whatever you want to call it, you always got to keep going back and checking to see if they've issued any amendments. Large procurements, like requests for proposals, RFPs, when those solicitations are issued, any of the potential offerers, competitors, may submit questions. And those questions will be answered by the agency, and the answer will be provided in an amendment to the solicitation. So you always got to keep checking to see if amendments have been issued. And typically, if you have submitted questions, that's how you will get the answers, is through an amendment, where the agency will list the question, and then they will provide the answer. And an amendment that may be all that's in the amendment is questions and answers provided. The last couple of things, you need to determine your potential to win the contract. Is it something that you have the capacity and capability of doing? It's just dialed in. You read that solicitation and say, that's what we do. You know your competition. You know how your competition prices have been in the past or currently, and you're going to go for it. So determine your potential to win the contract. Lastly, the Department of Defense has a new requirement starting this year, effective this fall, is cybersecurity certifications. Your company will need to get certified in one of 5 levels Typically, for what we're dealing with, it'll be level 1. There'll be some costs to get a third party to come in and check out your IT system to make sure that there won't be any breach or hacks from other parties to steal information. And you'll get a certificate. It'll be good for a number of years. There'll be reviews throughout that period that it's been effective, but this will start showing up in solicitations later this year in all DoD solicitations and the resulting contracts. So if you're not aware of this new requirement for Department of Defense contracts, you need to attend some classes. PTAC is going to be offering some cybersecurity workshops. They're free. The Department of Defense is calling it CMMC. I've been attending a lot of these classes, and there's a lot to learn. Okay, so that's solicitation review. Let's move on to the next one. We're on slide 8, proposal review. So typically most proposals have 3 components to them. 1, the solicitation may require you to submit a cover letter, and they will identify in the solicitation all the various things that they want you to provide in the cover letter. So not only the name of your company, but your DUNS number and your cage code, the solicitation number, so on and so forth. The other component of your proposal is a price proposal. And in the solicitation, it will identify CLINs and possibly SLINs. A CLIN is a contract line item number. It has a description, and you're going to be providing your price for that CLIN. There can be more than one CLIN in a solicitation, and so each CLIN will have a description, and you'll be providing your price to do that CLIN. There may be sub-CLINs for each CLIN, and that is a sub-line item number. And they may break out a CLIN into multiple sub-CLINs, and you got to price each one of those. And when you add those all up, that equals the price of the CLIN. So besides the CLINs, there are your direct costs. Your direct costs is your labor, materials, and equipment. And your indirect costs are what we call the overheads. Some companies and agencies call them also general and administrative costs. For example, in construction, there's 2 overheads. There's the home office overhead, and then there is the field office overhead. So in construction, you typically mobilize a work trailer on site, and you've got to hire or rent the porta potties and the heavy equipment, the fax machine, the telephone, the radios, all of that. That is all field office overhead. And your corporate home office is called home office overhead, where the president, the vice president, the secretaries, the invoice clerks, and all of those people are in the home office overhead. The other part of your price proposal is your profit, your fee that you want. The other thing another big difference between private entities, the commercial industry, and federal contracting is in federal contracts, when you put your proposal together, contingencies are not allowed. You can't, typically in private industry, you can put in your pricing and you may have 5% or 10% for contingency. That's to cover any unexpected things that may come up during the progress of fulfilling the contract. Well, in federal contracts, contingencies are not allowed in proposals. The reason for that is if there is a change after award, it will be negotiated and a modification issued to the contract. So you'll be compensated for it. So the government is paying as they go. Last item there is Longshore and Harbor Workers Compensation Act. This is something that a lot of companies are unaware of, and even on the government agencies the contracting officers are unfamiliar with, and government estimators. My 29 years, I had to become aware of this. For example, I worked in the shipyard in Bremerton, Washington for 2 years. Basically, any work that was done in the shipyard was subject to this act. It is an expensive act. It is approximately 23% of your labor costs in order to pay for that insurance. So the act applies if the work is going to be performed on, under, above, or in navigable waterways, such as Puget Sound, the Strait of Juan de Fuca, Lake Washington, any of the navigable rivers, like the Columbia River. If any of the work is performed in those water areas, this act applies. And if the act applies to your employees, you want to make sure that you purchase that insurance and make sure you put it in your proposal so you get compensated for it, because it is expensive. In my 29 years, one company went out of business because they did not have the insurance. There may be more questions on that subject at the end of this. So let's move on. Proposal review continued. So the other component of a proposal is your technical proposal. So I've identified here some of the factors that you may see in a solicitation. There may be a technical evaluation factor for approach, another one for your experience, another one for your safety record, another one for your quality control, and another one could be past performance. I put an asterisk on 2 of those because those 2 are the most common that you will see in any solicitation that has a technical proposal requirement. They want to know, have you done it before? That's experience. And how well did you do it before? That's past performance. And then they could also ask for any others like approach and safety and quality control. So those are technical proposal criteria, also known as factors. In the solicitation, they will identify the basis for award. Quite common in the last decade or 2, you will see that the agency may make award without discussions. That is important to note because the second line here, your first proposal needs to be your best proposal. Because of the first line, they may make award without discussions. So if you didn't sharpen your pencil or you weren't responsive to the solicitation, like you didn't provide everything that they asked for, you won't get an opportunity to complete it or correct it because they may make award without discussions. So there are 2 aspects to a proposal. One is being responsive and one is being responsible. Responsive means, did you follow the instructions in the solicitation? Did you provide what the agency requested you to submit? So for example, in a cover letter, they asked for you to provide 10 bits of information in that cover letter. You provided 8. That is not responsive. You can be eliminated just because you didn't follow instructions. So you boil it down to, if you can't follow instructions for preparing a proposal, how well are you going to do if you win the award in completing the project satisfactorily and on time? So that's one way of looking at it. Responsibility is the ability to perform. So the contracting officer of the agency is going to do a responsibility check. They're going to check your safety record. Do you owe the government? Any outstanding debts? Are there any felons in your employ? All that kind of stuff. So that's responsibility. They'll do an assessment to determine whether your company can successfully complete the award. So that's responsibility. Okay, so we've gone through the process of pre-award. The contract has been awarded. Now, in post-award, you may be given an opportunity for a debrief of the award. You should always ask for a debrief. And that includes even if you are the awardee, the winner of the procurement, because you can learn so much about how your proposal was evaluated. The information can be very useful for when you put a proposal together and compete on a future award to be able to submit a better proposal. So in what we just looked at, we looked at 3 components of proposal: cover letter, the price proposal, the technical proposal. In a debrief, you will learn how the government evaluated your proposal in all aspects. So even though that you won the award, you may have been weak in some areas. That is very useful for you to learn. And when you go to compete in the future, you can do a better job and be evaluated even better on your next proposal. What's important for the debrief is that you need to request it within 3 days after award notification. And there I have provided the Federal Acquisition Regulation part where it talks about debriefs and the various time frames for a debrief. So now that you've got the award, customer satisfaction is key, especially for future contracts. Because if your contract is, like, for example, one of these, architect, engineering, AE, services, construction, there are the dollar thresholds for when a federal agency must execute a performance evaluation. So if you have a service contract and it's greater than $1 million, they have to do a performance evaluation. If you have a service contract and it's $300,000, the agency doesn't have to do a performance evaluation. That can be a disadvantage to you because you may have did a stellar job, but no other federal agency will ever know that you did a stellar job because it was less than $1 million. It doesn't mean that an agency can't execute a performance evaluation under these thresholds. It just says they're not required to. So you can see that the dollar thresholds vary depending on the type of contract that there is. And at the bottom, if it's not one of the above, the threshold for all other procurements is $250,000. Okay, so that's slide 12. We're at the end. We are now ready for questions and answers. My last slide here is anytime that you have questions about the procurement process, pre-award, post-award, review of your solicitations, or review of your proposal, that is a service that the PTAC provides. We are more than happy to take a look at your proposal to make sure that you are responsive, because that is key. You've got to be responsive in order before an agency will even evaluate your proposal. The PTAC can provide that service for you. We only ask that you give us some ample time to do that. We recommend about a week before the proposal's due. That gives us time to review it, provide comments back to you so you can make corrections and changes and get it submitted on time. I was in a workshop yesterday afternoon on a request for quotes, reviewing a solicitation and deciding whether the company should submit a proposal or not. And in there, one of the things that we talked about is submitting your proposal on time. There were a number of examples, and there was some like 40 companies in that workshop that had experienced where they had submitted their proposal. Nowadays, it's electronically via email. You attach your proposal to it, and the agency got it 2 minutes after the due date and time, it's thrown out because it's late. Just 2 minutes. You know, half a day, it's late. It doesn't matter. If it says that the proposal is due May 13th, 2020 at 2 p.m., you don't want to submit it at 2 p.m. and 2 minutes after 2 p.m. because it is late. The federal acquisition regulations, and here is a copy of it. Federal acquisition regulations, there's a part in here that addresses late proposals, and it is unforgiving. So always make sure that you are on time with your proposals. Okay, opening up for questions. I'm sure there are many.
Okay, Terry, there were two that were in chat. One was from Victor. Why is the 8A the most difficult certification to obtain?
Okay, great question. It's a federally funded program, so taxpayers' money is involved in it, helping that contractor through classes through a 9-year program. It is costly. The other aspect of that is that it is only for, let's go back to that slide. Let's see, what slide was that? That was certifications. There we go, page 5. At the bottom, SBA 8A. So in order to qualify to become or to get in the 8A program, in the parentheses there, it says companies or individuals that are socially and economically disadvantaged. If you're only socially or only economically disadvantaged, you won't qualify. You have to be socially and economically disadvantaged. And when you go to that website and you submit your request via the website, not via the mail, so it is quick and they are processing them pretty timely now, you will see the questions that you have to answer. And those will be indications to you as to whether you may qualify. So you need to be socially and economically disadvantaged as an individual or as an entity, a company. Did I answer your question? Any other questions?
Yes, there was a question from David that asked, in sources sought, can they also constrain it to small business only rather than like SD, VOSB or WSB?
Yes, great question. And absolutely, the answer is yes. So when an agency is doing their market research and they are submitting in the Fedbizopps, let's see, where are we at? Let's go to that screen. Certifications, Fedbizopps. So the notice, it's the first one that we're talking about there, the sources sought. That's where the agency is doing their market research. So the companies are responding and the contracting officer is reviewing all the responses to that sources sought after the due date. And he's categorizing them by socioeconomic certifications. He's got 5 responses from small businesses. He has 1 response from a woman-owned. He has 2 responses from a veteran-owned. He has no Hubzones, and he has no 8As. He's going to do an assessment here. What's really going to stand out is that he's got 5 responses from small businesses. He's looking through that. He's going on to the SAM website. He's checking to see that they're registered. He's checking to see that they are certified as a small business. He's checking to see if their company is in good standing, so on and so forth. And he can then make that determination that he is going to set this procurement aside to small businesses only, and only small businesses can compete. So any of these other categories, they're all small businesses too, so they can compete also. So the woman-owned and the veteran-owned, they can compete too. And the solicitation is set aside to only small businesses. So the only group that they are eliminating is large businesses. And as we talked about earlier, the determination for a small business versus a large business is the NAIC, the North American Industrial Classification System code for that solicitation, because the solicitation will identify the NAIC. You are registered in SAM. You have that NAIC identified in SAM. You've gone to the SBA website to determine the size standard. The size standard, for example, for this NAIC is $15 million. Your average revenue is less than $15 million. You're going to self-certify as a small business, and you can compete for this solicitation. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Next question.
I don't have any other questions in chat. You are all allowed to talk. You just need to unmute. I do have a quick question. There's somebody on a phone only, 253-350-9802. Could you identify yourself, please?
Hi, yes. My name's Matt, but I'm also on the laptop as well.
Okay.
So my name should already be up.
Got
I just prefer hearing
Cool.
through my headphones.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So I thought we would have. Go ahead.
I do have a few more questions, and it looks like there's one in chat, but I don't want to take over. So it looks like Kiana has one about choosing NAICS code, and then I'll go with I have like 4 questions.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's do Kiana's first. So she says, for choosing your NAICS code, is it best to be specific, can't talk this morning, or choose all the codes related to the services or products offered? How best to choose your primary NAICS code if your business offers several primary services?
Okay, there's a lot of aspects to that question. So as I've learned working with PTAC over the past year, some of our clients that come to our monthly coffee hour, some of the companies are companies that sell supplies. Well, typically a supply company will sell to the federal agency any supply. But when you go into the NAICS to determine the NAICS codes, you can end up with 100 NAICS codes. So that's an issue. But you do want to kind of focus in on what your primary ones are, and you can identify the other ones also. So this gets into your capability statement, how many NAICS codes to identify on there, and in SAM, how many NAICS codes to identify in SAM when you register for the System for Award Management, SAM. So that's an extreme example, is companies that sell supplies to federal agencies. Let's go to swing the pendulum to the other side, and you're just a construction company. In NAICS, there are a number of NAICS codes for construction. You know, it could be for bridges, it could be for airstrips, it could be for ships. There are different NAICS codes. So you'll want to funnel down to the type of construction that your company does. Maybe you do airstrips and ships. So there is a NAICS code for each one of those. You could identify both of those as your primary, but maybe you also do residential construction, commercial construction, office buildings and whatnot. You haven't done a lot of them, but you can do them. So maybe those would be your secondary, less important NAICS codes, but you want to identify those in SAM, because when federal agencies go into SAM and do searches for companies, they do it by NAICS code. So you don't want to eliminate yourself. If you don't put in office buildings, and you do some, and you want to do some, you want to include that. But your primary, as we just talked about, is ships and airfields. So those are your two predominant ones, and you could have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 others also. So a NAICS code is 6 digits. I have it up on my other computer right now. The website is www.naics.com. And you can put in a keyword or a NAICS code and start drilling down. So the first one that comes up is code 11, which is agricultural, forestry, fishing, and hunting. And the number of businesses that are registered in the United States under that code is 378,000 companies. That's all sizes. And then you drill down from there. So if you select code 11 for agriculture, then you would, under code 11, you go down to 2 more codes for a total of then 4. And then you can drill down even further and get another 2 codes for a total of 6 codes, 6 characters in the NAICS code for the type of business that you are interested in, that you have the capability and capacity of doing. Did I answer your question on NAICS codes?
Okay, so I'll jump in with my first question, which is, so I'm in the IT and software field, and it's kind of a 2-pronged question. One is, so there are some federal requirements for example, standards for software that the federal government is supposed to adhere to. The National Institute for Science and Technology, for example, sets out certain security standards that a given type of software needs to meet. So how closely do federal governments or federal agencies have to adhere to those? And there's some context. There was recently an evaluation of blockchains and how secure they were and whether they met the government requirements. And it turns out that most of them do not. Our proposal, we believe, does meet those, but the submission time has passed. It's in the evaluation phase. So I'm wondering, can I contact them during this evaluation phase and say, I think we meet all of these standards? So I know, 2 prongs, sorry.
Are you saying that they've already started the evaluation of your proposal and you've identified an error in your proposal that you want to change?
No. So I'm...
David, you just cut out. David, we can't hear you.
Can't hear you, David.
I think he was saying that he wanted to check in to make sure they understood that he feels they meet all the requirements.
Well, if he's responsive to the solicitation, as we talked about before, that the agency has requested the following information to be submitted for evaluation and award of a contract, and he provided all that information, there should be no questions. If the agency, through the evaluation process of their company's proposal and any other company's proposals, that they come up with questions that they can't make award without discussions, they will then go into discussions and they will identify which companies they're going to enter into discussions with. And at that time, your company will answer their questions, and you could provide other information also in addition to what you already provided in your proposal. And when they close discussions, you will be given an opportunity to submit a revised proposal. And then there is another round of evaluations on proposals. So that's the discussion, how discussions go. And there could be multiple rounds of discussions. But typically there may be one round of discussions, and then award is made. Are you there, David? Are you back online?
Yes, I'm sorry, my
Okay.
internet cut out just as you were starting your explanation.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay.
I can hear you now.
Okay. So it sounds like there may be, I caught the last couple of words, there may be a discussion area during the course of the evaluation process where
Yes.
I'd have a chance to respond.
Yeah,
Right.
but they have to initiate it, right, Terry?
Yes, correct. So I'll go through my response again for your benefit.
Sorry about that.
When they issue the solicitation, the agency required you to submit certain information.
Mm-hmm.
If you provided all that information and submit your proposal on time, then you are responsive. You should feel comfortable if you provided all the information that was asked for. Now, then when the agency sets up their review boards and does their evaluations of the proposals, they may find one or more offerers that they have questions that they need to ask in order to make a determination that that offer is good and of interest for them to award. And they make that determination that they need to enter into discussions. So then they will issue an amendment to the solicitation. We're entering into discussions, and they will determine a competitive range. Say there were 30 proposals, but they're only going to enter into discussions with 7 companies. And if you're fortunate to be one of the 7, they will set up a discussion period to ask the agency's questions to you, get your answers, and that's an opportunity for you to further elaborate on any part of your proposal. They will complete the discussions. They will close discussions. They will convene the evaluation boards a second time, because you will be given an opportunity to submit your revised proposal as a result of discussions. And then by a due date, which is a short turnaround, could be anywhere from 5 to 10 days. And the boards reconvene and they evaluate the revised proposals. And then they typically make a recommendation, get the money, and make award. It's not unheard of. They may go through a second round of discussions. Unusual, but can be done. I think that ends my response.
Very helpful.
Okay.
Yes. And they will contact me directly. I don't have to keep pinging the.
Yeah. Don't ping them. You don't want to do that.
Or I mean the sam.gov, the beta.sam.gov. I don't have to watch that for the discussion. It would be an email, for example, that says discussions are open. We'd like some feedback. Okay.
Yes, they will communicate directly with you. That's why in your cover letter, it's so important to put down your points of contact, your addresses, emails, phone numbers, people's names, and whatnot. Points of contact in your cover letter. Yeah. It's also on your proposal submission, whether it's a standard form 18 for an RFQ or a standard form 33 or 1449. On that government form, there's also a place that you have to fill out when you submit your proposal, your signature, your typed name and address, your cage code, your date, all that kind of information also. So that's another place that they can look at as to who to contact from your company to enter into discussions.
Very helpful. Thank you. It was a black box before about what happens after you send it off. So now,
All right,
now I
great.
know a little more about that. Thank you.
Okay. Next question. I thought sure I would get questions on cybersecurity certification level, the new DoD requirement called CMMC. Every contractor that wants a federal contract is going to have to get their IT system certified by a third party starting the end of this year. Otherwise, you will not be awarded a contract. The other subject I thought you might have questions on is the Longshore and Harbor Workers Compensation Act on page 8, when you need to have that insurance and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and they can always follow up if they think of a question afterwards as well.
Certainly.
I do have another quick question, and it looks like Kiana has one in chat too. So I'll let her go first.
Okay, so Kiana says, as a home healthcare company and commercial lab that is focused on helping to increase our COVID-19 testing and health screening capabilities, how can we best approach government entities like FEMA in being able to help with testing and screening? Okay, so Kiana, actually the state has been posting links for companies that want to be involved in the COVID thing. I will get those to you via email. And as with all things COVID related, they have changed some of the thresholds and some of the ways they are doing contracting to speed things along, because it's an emergency or crisis. So Terry might want to address how things change when things are declared an emergency in the federal world.
Well, timeframes get shrunk considerably. So as we have experienced in the last couple of months, we've seen urgent and compelling solicitations issued with turnaround time for a proposal to be in 10 days, 14 days, as opposed to the typical solicitation period of being 30 days or 45 days. So we're seeing a very constrained turnaround time and award. So here's the requirement: get your proposal in by this date, and we are going to award by this date. We're seeing more and more of that. So there's that aspect during like this pandemic that we're going through. Congress has provided lots of money to get through this pandemic. So we're seeing agencies having new requirements that they haven't had before, and urgency to get money awarded, get money obligated to fulfill requirements like so supply chain and providing food to the people who have lost their jobs, getting food from the farmers and the packing plants and whatnot. You're seeing all kinds of new types of requirements and very short fused time frames. What else could I elaborate on?
Hi, just piggybacking on on the cybersecurity that you spoke about earlier. You did say by fall of 2020, is this all businesses, and forgive me, I had to step away for a moment when you talked about it. Is it all businesses that need to go through that certification, or is it certain businesses with that need to do that?
So right now, the pilot program is through all Department of Defense agencies. That could be all the military agencies, Defense Logistics Agency. There's a lot of Department of Defense agencies. It will be a requirement for any company to receive a contract through any department in the Defense Department to be certified, have their IT systems certified in the required level that will be identified in the solicitation. There are 5 levels, 1 being the least stringent and 5 being the most stringent. For most of the people that we're talking about here, except for companies like David's IT company, most of the companies will be level 1, the least amount of the requirements. But you still have to get a third party to come in and review your IT system and give you a certification that is good for, I think, 3 years or so. And there will be reviews throughout the 3 years in order to get a federal contract. So that is new. That is big change to industry, that if you want a Department of Defense contract, you will have to get third-party certification of your IT system. Because as we hear in the news, we hear this foreign states like North Korea, China, Iran, any number of companies doing internet espionage, hacking in, stealing proprietary information, and using it for themselves. I was at a seminar about a month ago on the cybersecurity certification requirements, and they showed the new Air Force F-35, I believe it is, and a picture of China's new fighter jet, and you couldn't tell them apart. And China was able to get the designs through hacking and build it for about 15% of what it costs the US company to produce that plane. And they look almost identical. So that's why the Department of Defense is going through this cybersecurity certification requirements. It's going to be for any DoD contract. So the other federal agencies are watching the DoD in executing and laying out this process. And if it is, or when it is determined successful, the other federal agencies are going to be following suit. So all the federal government over probably the next 10 years is going to have this cybersecurity certification requirement to protect proprietary information. Earlier I mentioned most companies will be, most everybody that's listening on this workshop will be level 1. If you're an IT company, like David identified their company, it will probably be level 2. Level 3 is any solicitation that requires classified information will be level 3. And level 4 and 5 will be only a handful of companies in the United States. Did I answer your question on cybersecurity?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just as an FYI, the RFP is out now by a third-party nonprofit for the third-party certifiers. If anyone tells you right now they are a CMMC certifier, they are not being truthful. And also, I'm not sure if Terry mentioned it, but the contracts, the DoD contracts that when they first start will identify what level of CMC is required to perform that contract.
Right. So when you do, like early on in this presentation, we talked about solicitation review. Let's see, where is that at? It is number 7. Okay, so when you're doing your solicitation review, the first bullet up there is identified as set aside. We talked about whether the procurement is set aside to, is it full and open competition, which is small business and large business, or is it set aside small business, or maybe it's set aside to woman-owned or veteran-owned or whatnot. So it's important to know that and that you meet that criteria. If you don't waste your time with this solicitation. If you do, then continue on doing your solicitation review. And very important that we just talked about is the very bottom one there, cybersecurity certification level. The solicitation will identify the cybersecurity level that is required for this solicitation and the follow-on contract. It will say certification 1, 3, 4, whatever. And if you don't hold a certification that is at least that level, say maybe you're an IT company and you're level 2 certified, a solicitation comes out that has some nuance of IT in it and it only requires level 1. You're qualified because you're level 2. If the solicitation comes out with a level certification of 3 because there's some classified information involved in this requirement, and you are certified at level 1, you can't compete. I mean, if you spend the resources to put a proposal together to compete for this, the agency is going to receive it. They're going to see your certification because they are probably going to make it a submittal requirement with your proposal to provide a copy of your certification. And your certification is going to say level 1. The solicitation says you have to be level 3. You're non-responsive. They're not even going to evaluate. So it's very important to determine the set aside and determine the cybersecurity certification level when those requirements come out in solicitations the end of this year. Did I answer your question? Actually, I guess that was a follow-on to Kathy.
Okay, and then David, you still had more questions?
Yeah, I do have another question about BAAs, broad agency announcements. So there's a BAA that the Army has put out, and it's pretty nebulous. It has a 5-year window, and my question is, there's an element in there that I am interested in addressing, but there's no proposal requirement. It's pretty nebulous. So I'm wondering how to even best address it. Do I just contact? Do I send a letter? Do I send an email? I mean, how do you go about potentially participating in a BAA?
Well, I just learned something today after my 29 years of experience as a contracting officer. A BAA, I am not familiar with those.
Oh, okay. See, it's a little bit of a corner case then, I guess, Terry.
Right. Never too old to learn new things.
It's often related to innovation, I think.
Oh.
Yes, like research and development.
Oh, okay. Well, I have very little experience in R&D. But in that BAA, there should be some contact information provided, like email address, phone number, agency point of contact, and maybe or maybe not it identifies how to communicate with the agency on the BAA. Does it have anything like that, David?
It does. It has a point of contact for each section, and it's about 127-page document with various areas and probably 50 different contact people. So sounds like it's just get in contact with them via email and start a discussion.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I see no harm in you contacting the person that's identified in the BAA and ask the question or ask how to submit the question.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome. Great questions today. It's 9:29. So the last time I did this class last year, we did it in an hour and a half with Q&A. So we are tracking right along. And I got lots more time if you've got questions. Here to help you.
Okay, and I'm just getting ready to put the link on the chat about the site that will give people the information on the medical, the COVID related.
Okay.
Gotta find it again.
Also, I did an update to the presentation this morning. So the one I sent you, Kathy, yesterday don't use that one, I will send you this one again today.
Oh, all right. And again, you can always, you know, follow up if this is not your normal PTAC center, you know, you're welcome to contact us or contact your regular counselor. We all work together, so it's all good.
So one quick follow-up question for you, Terry. Let's say that there is an RFP that goes out that is not constrained to small businesses, just open competition.
Right.
And then there are proposals from some folks who are small businesses, for example. During the evaluation process, will those contracting officers still, I guess, if all of the things being considered, try to meet their quotas for small business and kind of lean towards small businesses if all other things considered they are equal? Or is it, or is that ship already sailed by that time?
No, they won't give preferential treatment to any socio-economic certified companies. If the solicitation was issued as full and open competition, anybody, any U.S. company can compete for the award of the contract, can be awarded to a large business or whatnot. If by chance a small business does win the contract, or even further, it's a Hubzone company or a veteran-owned company, the agency takes advantage of that and records the award as awarded to a small business or a veteran-owned business. So that will help them meet their socioeconomic goals for the year. But to answer your question, there is no preferential treatment in the evaluation of all of the proposals, regardless of the business size.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome. We still have 9 people signed on in the workshop.
Yep.
Yeah. We have a lot of smart people attending this. I've only heard from about 4 people. Don't be afraid to ask your question. There are no dumb questions, especially for companies that are just trying to get their feet wet in federal procurement. It is a huge bureaucracy. I've been in it for 29 years, and in the federal acquisition regulation, or this is a copy of it, there are 53 parts to it. I probably only dealt with half of the parts in my 29 years. There is so much to know potentially, and as a PTAC, we're here to help you through that process. And I'll give a plug for the PTAC in Silverdale, which is the northwest part of the state of Washington. We are now 2 of 8 PTACs in the state of Washington that have retired contracting officers. So it's a big advantage that we offer in our local PTAC office to you, the clients, the small businesses, to provide assistance to you. We have a wealth of experience. I got 29 years. Mary Jo, I don't know what she has, 12, 20 years herself. Mona Carlson has 25 years. So right there is a lot of experience. So if there's no other questions, we are done for the day. I'm glad you all came along, and hopefully you've picked up some information on the pre-award process of getting registered, getting certified, and up through award, and asking for that debrief after award.
Terry, one more question from Kiana.
Okay. Second question for Kiana.
I'm trying to unmute her. It won't let me unmute you for some reason. Oh, there now she can talk. Okay, cool. Go ahead, Kiana. Okay, her thing does not want to, okay, she typed it out. What about other places other than FBO to look for solicitations? So if you're looking for things other than federal, then it becomes more challenging because you have to sign up for, Washington State, for Oregon State, etc. PTAC does have a service called Bid Match. It's $165 a year, and it's doing a search on federal, state, and local opportunities based on the NAICS codes and the keywords you provide in this form that your counselor would send to you. You get to try it out for 30 days, and if it works, you don't tell us otherwise. You get billed from the main office in Thurston County. If you decide it doesn't work, then you can just let us know and they will cancel it, and you would stop getting the emails. If there's a match every day, you get an email every day with a link to what they consider the matched opportunities. But you can set up a search in WEBS, which is the state website. You can sign up for searches on sites like the Port of Seattle, the city of Tacoma, but it's creating a lot of more work for you versus a service like Bid Match.
Yeah, I will add to that. If you are seeking lots of opportunities to grow your company, you could spend a lot of time yourself going to all these various websites on a weekly, if not daily basis to find those opportunities, to screen them, to see if you want to compete for them, or hiring a part-time or full-time person to do that for you. It's time consuming because there are so many websites to look for solicitations or sources sought or pre-proposal notices and solicitations. This is a wonderful bid match program that will save you so much money in your time or having to hire a person to look for opportunities. It's called Bid Match, $165 a year. It screens all of those opportunities, federal, state, county, city, universities, and others in the area that you are wanting to do business in, and sends you an email anytime there's a match. It's great. So affordable.
Okay, Scott is saying that they would like to hire a federal grant consultant to hold their hands through the process as they are targeting a specific grant that we actually help design. So Scott, are you saying that you are trying to create a custom grant for you? I'm a little confused.
No, ma'am. Actually, it's a request for proposal that we have been pushing for a long time. And finally, it's a long story, but after 6 years, they're finally addressing what we propose should be addressed, and what the government should be asking for. And so now they're asking for it, and now we have to respond. Meaning other people can respond too, because they have to go out for bid. We designed the front end part of the what we call the administrative relational section as far as the fisheries is concerned, the institutional mechanisms in terms of all of how that their automation works as it relates or as it corresponds with the seafood industry. It's somewhat of a relational database, if you will, just to automate the raw resource as it relates to the finished product. It's a it's actually it's in the it's been written into law actually. But back in 2014, the Obama administration came out with an initiative to battle illegal, unregulated, unreported fishing. But in order to do that, there were certain digital components that had to be installed. Well, they wrote the program. They called it the Seafood Import Monitoring Program. It's a framework. The only problem is they're missing the digital components part of that framework. If you call NOAA, they will tell you they're latent. Why they're latent? It's a mandate for U.S. As we import 80% of all the seafood we consume, National Marine Fisheries Services has a mandate to audit 100% of that seafood. Notwithstanding, it's not being enforced right now. Why? Because again, those digital components haven't been installed. So now they're going back to the drawing board and they're requesting those same digital components that we designed way back when they asked us for because as administrations change, as you may know, Jerry, a lot of the nomenclature changes, a lot of the standards all of a sudden change. So we have to roll with the changes, right?
Right.
So we're doing that, and I think we're more qualified than anybody else, only because we designed the original architecture, and so we're a little ahead of the game, so to speak. And there are some proprietary aspects to it, but we've already decided we're giving away the front end. We call the infrastructure, which is basically, there's a storage. You have to have storage and you have to have retrieval capabilities. In our case, we call it trusted information and secure communications. Well, there's a lot of digital stuff flying around while all that's happening, including some proprietary algorithms that benefits both sides, of the fisheries industry, for example, because their front administrative framework is not automated. There's a lot of redundancy, of course. There's a lot of inefficiency. And of course, there's a lot of loopholes for piracy, recovery laundry, seafood fraudsters. Most of the NGOs estimate that, including the World Bank and the United Nations, estimate it to be over $100 billion a year displacement from legitimate law-abiding individuals and responsible communities.
So Scott, does this solicitation, are they asking for a contractor to administer the entire program? They're looking for outside.
It has to be an association. So we have two fishery associations that would be administering the contract. We're basically part of the part. We're providing the architectural design. We have several third-party service providers that will be providing the cloud storage. We're providing the encryption, some of the algorithms, and we're also using some other NGO algorithms like Global Fishing Watch is a new NGO that's providing services using satellites from the sky, using transponders to detect boats around the world. The only problem is pirates don't turn the power on their transponder and they spook the GPS. So that's not a good way to go about solving that problem. So we've come up with a solution, and now we just have to implement it. So we're planning on testing it in Alaska. And so we have two of our fishing associations that will be bidding on it. But the objective is for, once we prototype it, it's to be scaled around the United States and then hopefully around the world to become a standard. That's the plan.
What's your question about the
right?
RFP?
The United States saves a lot of money when they, standardize, how that works, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's your question, Scott, about the RFP?
Well, I don't really have a question other than we're trying to hire somebody to look in deeply to evaluate, to understand what's going on, looking to inside our situation, and then walk it through the whole grant process and get it signed, sealed, and delivered by July, sometime beginning of July, I believe. is the deadline.
So you're looking for somebody to help you prepare the grant submission.
Sir? I apologize, I missed you. What did you say?
So Scott, you're looking for somebody to assist you in preparing the grant submission?
Yes, not just myself, but the whole team, if you will, kind of organize the whole team and make sure everybody's got their, assignment done, so to speak. And follow it through as we go through the whole process, because it'll be a long term. It's not just a 1-year grant, not projected anyway. It's really messed up. It would be a long term, every year kind of deal, revolving grant. And there are some new components. We have some smart lawyers on the team, including Perkins Coie, based in Seattle, our intellectual property law firm. And they hold a lot of IP silos for other big tech service providers there in Seattle. We're not limited to using those service providers, but they just happen to work out all the, major needs already. I've been working with some of their software engineers now for going on 4 years, both on the Microsoft side, on the what I call administrative side, and then of course Amazon it actually built a hierarchical architecture that for our distributed side or our decentralized side.
Yeah, Scott, I don't know of any companies to refer you to. Maybe Kathy can help that way, or the Washington.
Yeah, I don't. But you can always, go the route of having one of the PTAC counselors review the solicitation and your proposal prior you submitting it, because as we often say, the people who know your company best are you. And I think, unless I don't see any other questions, I've addressed everything I think in the chat. So Terry, are you ready to go? Scott, you're welcome to follow up with Terry or your counselor if you still have questions. But I think we're gonna stop for now. Terry, do you have any final thoughts?
I do not. I thanked everybody for attending, and hopefully they got a benefit out of this almost 2 hours.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.